Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on March the 30th. Hope things are going well for you guys. Wanted to talk with you about markets and about all kinds of things, just to sort of go over where we are and where I think we're headed, changes that we're making to portfolios. And then at the end of my talk in several minutes, I want to talk with you about something I need a little help from you guys on, that we're kind of at an impasse with my former company, and I'm going to have to ask you guys to get involved a little bit in helping us to fix that as quickly as possible. Let's start with some basics. We've had a little bit of a sell-off. The NASDAQ sold off 16%. The S&P sold off about 12% over the last 5 or 6 weeks. That was largely two things hitting at the same time. The fact that the Federal Reserve told us all that inflation is transitory, and then all of a sudden they said, well, actually not. It's going to be with us 2 to 3 to 4 years. And in fact, we are seeing the worst inflation that we've seen in 40 years, and it probably will hit 10%. There are two numbers that we look very closely at: the Consumer Price Index. That is a list of things, I think there's around 40 of them, that they add together and determine the increase month over month, year over year. A number that's more important than that and is a leading indicator is Producer Price Index. And so here's a case where when farmers are having to pay more for their to get their product to market because diesel is now $5 a gallon, that actually shows up before the consumer does, before you see it at the store, is where they take the analysis. So I can tell you that that's caused some consternation in the markets, and then of course the Russian-Ukraine war. The day that Fed Chairman Powell made his last speech, it had very much a calming impact on the market when he finally came out and laid his cards down and said to us, okay, we're going to probably have 6 to 7 rate hikes. We likely will have one every meeting, which is every 60 days for the next year or so. And what is the purpose of that? Well, quite frankly, the Federal Reserve's primary job is to stabilize the economy. I want to give you two definitions for you to think about. Number one, inflation is when you have way too many dollars chasing too few goods. That really happened when the government printed $6 trillion in about a year's period of time, year and a half, for COVID, and many people were not working. And the problem was there was nobody making automobiles. They were all shut down. They were not harvesting trees. All of the pulp mill plants and the plywood plants were shut down. And so people had this money and there was no place to go with it. So all of a sudden the economy begins opening up and people are buying cars and houses and land like you've never seen. And that's going to take a while to work its way through. The supply chain problem is fundamentally mismanagement by our Fed officials, but largely as a function of all of these things that were shut down, pent-up optimism. The next thing I would tell you is the Federal Reserve, the way they slow down the economy is largely raise interest rates. So if you can buy a house right now on a 30-year note at 3.5%, and a year from now that will cost you 6% interest, it will absolutely slow down the market, and that's the purpose of rate hikes. This can be done, they tell us at this point in time. I've been in this business 30 years, I've watched this many times, but they believe they can accomplish this with a soft landing, meaning that we will not go into a recession or what is called stagflation. Stagflation is something that we have not seen literally in 40 to 50 years. So having said all of that, one of the things I've heard a lot in the last months, or a month and a half, 2 months, is, oh, I'm scared to death to look at my statement. I'm not going to look at my statement. You know, it's terrible. And there's a few things I want to tell you about that. First off, when you see your April statement, I think you're going to be stunned probably that in the last 10 days, the markets have come back 10%. So you're down probably a few percent from where you were in December, January time period. Secondly, I'm looking at a chart right here of the S&P 500, and I can tell you as of last night, the S&P 500 is up just about 15% for the last 12 months. 15% for the last 12 months. So this sell-off that occurred was necessary and actually part of the rhythm of the markets. The second thing, which is even more incredible, is we saw a 35% sell-off culminating on March 23rd of 2020. This was from COVID. Do you know that from that bottom on March 23rd, 2020 to March 23rd, 2022, which was a week ago today, the S&P 500 is up 100%. 100% in 2 years. Now that's from the bottom that we saw. What I would tell you is that's a big part of my job, is to help people not make poor decisions. I couldn't tell you how many times that I have conversations in my last 30 years, oh, get me out, get me out, get me out. And I say to people, do you recognize this is a market? Just like if you were selling cattle or selling wheat or anything else. There has to be a buyer for every seller. So when people get nervous and they want to sell, who buys that? Well, that's what I do. And it literally is over the course of 10 or 15 or 20 years of you being in this industry, you're going to find out that's where the money is made. And you're going to see that happen. We are in the process of making several changes to our portfolios, and you will be getting confirmations on that as we have wallowed out of bottom, now come back from that. Inflation, during inflationary periods of time, hard assets are important. Real estate would be one of those, and many other things. High dividend paying stocks are important. We always have a bend toward what I would call disruptive technology. Technology that is new and improved, that changes the way we do our life, and is not going back. And so we tend to be a little bit over the norm on those, and so our portfolios take a hit sometimes. Many of you were down as much as 12 to 13%, most of you probably 7 to 8% who were in our moderate portfolios. And what you're seeing is that we are probably 75, 80% back from that. We're not out of the woods by any stretch. Things could get uglier for a period of time with Russia and Ukraine. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm just telling you the market sell-off was a good thing. It brought valuations back into a comfortable place after we had, in many stocks in the S&P 500, a 70 to 100% increase in 2 years. And so these things sold off for a little while. But literally, if you were to look at your statements, or when we get a chance to finally get on the road, get finished with our transition, what you're going to find out is you guys made a lot of money in the last 2 years if you have been with us that long. And you're just going to see that this was a pause that was necessary, and it brought valuations back to a very comfortable place. In addition to that, I would tell you that we are about 90 to 92 or 93% through with transition. This has been long and arduous for two primary reasons. I would say to you that big investment banks and insurance companies in the Northeast and in the West Coast have been largely dysfunctional. And what for all of my career would have taken a week or two now take 2 or 3 months. People are not working from home, or people have left their jobs and they haven't been able to replace them. Insurance companies are very slow to respond. And so that's made things more difficult for the ladies and for Shelby and Jeremy and to some extent me. And this has taken longer, quite frankly, than I thought. So if you're thinking, wow, this has taken so long, well, you ought to be here. And many of you say, I can't believe how many times I had to sign my name. Well, do you know, I have to sign my name right under you. If you signed electronically, I can sign electronically. If you had to wet sign or use a pen, I have to sign right below you. We have 840 households here that we work with at Oak Financial Group, and the average client has 6 accounts, so that's 4,800 accounts. And so we are about, as I said, 92, 93, 94% through. I know that based on the assets that we had before we started the transition, new money coming in versus what's showing up in Black Diamond currently. Many of you have questions about Black Diamond, and I can tell you